So we picked this topic of anger. We've been working with the whole topic of power through through the last few months as we run these webinars, and we realised that it's almost as if women's anger is this resource that isn't being well used at the moment in the world. So we wanted to, and it's often something that we shy away from. So we wanted to bring it foreground and put it under the spotlight. And our wish for you is that you go away feeling much more, you befriend your anger and you see it as a resource and something that gives you fuel to be courageous in the world and take action for the things that you believe in. So that you go away with a different understanding and a different relationship with your own anger and energy and enthusiasm and motivation to put these tools and different ways of looking at anger into practice. So I'm going to hand back to Hetty.
So anger is a pretty interesting topic. Well, we think so, and I hope you do too. I guess you do, otherwise you wouldn't be here. We're going to begin. I'm going to begin with an Aristotle quote. That's a pretty good pedigree to quote, isn't it? The great philosopher, ancient Greek philosopher. And he said, anybody can become angry. That's easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, and at the right time, and critically for the right purpose and in the right way, that's not within everybody's power, and it's not easy. So this session on anger forms a part of our series that we're doing on power. We're exploring different kinds of power. And anger is a critical element, if you like, in that landscape of power. What do we know about it and so on? Would you put into the chat answers to this question? Why and how do we suppress our anger as women? And indeed, do we? So we'll start with some of your thoughts and ideas. It's still looked at as being aggressive, depending how we can convey what we really have to say. I swallow it down because, as I said before, we're perceived as aggressive, fear of being seen as out of control. Out of control. And if you remember back to the earliest days of modern psychology, Freud defined a whole area for women's anger, and it was called hysteria. So yes, out of control, hysterical, unstable, fear of being rejected because it's what we know, perhaps as anger has been role modeled to us. Fear of the labels attached to our anger. Negative emotions, perhaps it's more masculine as emotion. To be heard, clenching my jaw, holding back, fear of upsetting people, lack of confidence to speak up, and so on. It's a pretty rich, interesting, and I have to say, slightly dispiriting, isn't it, to see how much, and I join you with all of this. We're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. I came from a client this morning where one of her team, the head of her unit, said she could stop being so happy and pleasing all the time. And 2 days later, she was told by a man in the same department that she should stop being so abrupt because she appeared as angry and that was off-putting. And it felt very much like she was damned if she did and damned if she didn't. And I think that anger is particularly pertinent right now. Many of us are feeling pretty angry at what's going on in the world. But anger is a complicated feeling, and it's not one that we're taught to understand, to explore, to befriend, as Liz used, when we're young. Anger is generally seen as just about condonable for boys. Boys will be boys, go and hit something, don't hit something. There's a lot of expectation about the way boys express anger. But when girls express it, it's still seen in just about every culture I've worked with, it's still seen as a bit unusual, a bit, oh, not sure about this. Perhaps we could, what's wrong? And anger, of course, could be an expression of frustration. It could be an expression of hurt. It could be an expression of not being heard. Somebody put in there, speaking up, lack of confidence to speak up. Maybe it's anger at being bullied or seeing bullying somewhere else. I know so it could be an expression of our sense of justice. That's always what gets me. I can always rise to the fight if I see someone else being bullied. And is that how we think about anger? Does it automatically mean rising to the fight, aggression? And so often we will shift to tears or swallow it down, allowing it to either corrode us. We know the beautiful Blake poem, I was angry with my friend. I told it not. I can't remember the exact poem, and I'm lousy at quoting, and I didn't have it ready because it just suddenly came to me. But I spoke my anger, and my anger left me. But when we swallow it down, we stir it, don't we? And that can morph into meanness, irritability, critical, a sort of, well, irritability will do. And we don't have many role models. No wonder we don't get angry. Damned if we do and damned if we don't. And the message still for so many of us growing up in whatever cultures we've grown up is nice girls don't. Nice girls don't. We're told when we hit the workplace, just be careful. I remember my mother, who was a tremendous a sort of peace activist. She joined just about every march going. She was quite outspoken. She was well known for standing up. And when I went to university, she said, be careful. Be careful. Nobody likes, you can't have it both ways. You can't be attractive and speak up and be heard. And I was so shocked at the time that this was coming from someone who had spoken up in her life, who had and paid the price, and often paid the price of being slightly marginalized, not included. And so women continue to be denigrated if they show their anger. You know, we have a huge vocabulary in the English language for women who are angry. They're sometimes called shrews or fishwives or mean girls or bad girls and so on. And if they do convert their anger into power and take a stand, woe betide, bad things happen. And when we were preparing this webinar, both of our thoughts, Liz and I both immediately said, Joan of Arc, burnt at the stake. Now, I hope it may be happening still somewhere, but none of us here today are at risk of being burnt at the stake. But as a metaphor, it can feel like that. You're going to be pilloried, you're going to be humiliated, you're going to be marginalized. We are going to be marginalized. So that's a little bit of an introduction to say, why would we express our anger? It's a dangerous thing. And we're currently seeing quite extraordinary displays of primitive sort of primate anger, chest beating, saber rattling, the big bros in town shouting louder, I can because I'm in power. I can do this. And the humiliation of others and a throwing out of many of the tenets that make for civilized society. I'm reminded of Gandhi's wonderful statement when he was asked what he thought of Western civilization. And he said it would be a good idea. At the moment, we're living with the demolishing of what we had used to call some of the civilized interactions. So we're seeing displays of anger out there that, as some of you've commented on in the chat, why would I want to be like that? Well, there is another way. There are other ways to engage with our anger rather than swallow it, convert it into tears, or deny it. So, Liz, I'm going to hand over to you, and we'll start.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you, Hetty. That's a really good sort of context, really, about how women's anger has been viewed culturally. And what I'm going to talk about is more about the sort of biology of anger. And those of you who've worked with us know that one of the key red threads that runs through our work is this idea of working with the body and embodiment, and moving beyond just cognitive concepts to how do we experience this in our body, and more importantly, how do we transform things in our bodies. This is such a sense of power and resource that we've been cut off from as women over millennia, really. Patriarchy has taught us not to trust our bodies and see the body as less than the intellect. So probably about 25 years ago, I started training as a humanistic psychotherapist. And one of the very first workshops I ever did was a weekend on working with your anger and managing your anger. And one of the exercises they got us to do was a drawing of our anger. And so I got to set to work with my coloured pencils, and then we had to share in pairs and in the group what we'd drawn. And I'd drawn a fist with a bloodied hammer in it and a blood stain down the wall, which basically looked like I'd smashed someone's brains out against the wall. And I was thinking, crikey, I'm more angry than I realise. It was it was quite a shock to realise, having had this sort of rather genteel Catholic convent school upbringing where definitely anger wasn't nice. And it made me realise that perhaps I wasn't going to sort out my relationship with anger in a weekend. And 25 years later, I think I'm still working with it. And one of the concepts that they taught us, which was so valuable, was that anger is a feeling, it's an emotion, it's something we experience in our body. And at a most basic level, it's a sense of charge. It's energy, it's an upward movement, it's often quite hot, but it's charge in the body. And it's neither good nor bad, it just is. It's a physiological response. And actually, its purpose, it actually does have a positive function. All our emotions have a positive function. And anyone who's seen the Pixar film Inside Out, the one about emotion, love that film, love that film. And, explains all the core emotions have a purpose. And if we ignore any of them, then it's at a cost to us. So anger is there to show us that something is wrong, something is impinged on our boundaries, and it's information. It's telling us something, and it's bringing our attention to something that needs to be attended to, that we might otherwise cognitively talk ourselves out of. So that's anger. And then what we do with it, how we choose to then behave after we've registered that anger, is a behavior. And very often in our culture, anger turns into aggression. And so it becomes abusive. It's either attacking someone else, or as women, often we will turn it in on ourselves, and it becomes that self-critic, which can really run us down. So because we associate anger with aggression in our culture, we therefore think that anger is bad, and we talk ourselves out of or deny our anger. And in doing that, we lose such a massive source of power. So one of the things we're going to do today is tease these two things apart and help us understand the difference between the emotion, the feeling, the physiological response, and then our behavior, how we choose to behave as a result of registering and noticing that we feel anger. So in order to make this real, I'm going to take you through an exercise. So if you can uncross your legs, put your feet flat on the ground, and I want you to bring something to mind where you feel some anger. This could be something that's happening in the world, and there's certainly no shortage of things to get angry about at the moment. It could be something that's happened recently in your personal life or is current. What I'd say is, out of a scale of 10, don't pick a 10, pick something more in the mid-range for the purpose of the exercise, because we don't want to overwhelm you, but pick something that has some charge for you, that definitely produces a response. So let's take a moment to call something to mind. I mean, an example, something that I'm thinking about a lot at the moment, is the position of women in Afghanistan, and the way that the Taliban has really clamped down, and all these hideous restrictions they're placing on women. And when I see pictures of how women used to be in Afghanistan participating in life and how they're silenced now, I can feel this anger, this charge, this sense of outrage rising up in me. So if you're struggling to come up with an example, probably not. If you've signed up for this workshop, I'm sure you've got something in mind, but think about something. And now bring it to mind, and now give yourself permission to be not your best self, be off-center, when you're in a bad space and you get angry. And notice you might be sort of slumped, you might be feeling aggressive. Notice when you're in an unskillful place, how you respond to anger. Take a moment to organize that bodily. And notice, do you tense up? So do a body scan. Are you tensing? Is your jaw tensing? Where do you tense up? Notice what your breathing's like. Does it get tighter, shallower? Notice what your thoughts are like, and not so much the content, the shape of your thoughts. Are they smooth, or are they spiky and jagged? The shape of your thoughts. And if your eyes are open, notice what your vision is like. Do you have access to your peripheral vision, or has it become more tunnel? So notice and take a moment to register what your signature stress response is when you register anger and what happens in your body. And most people will find that they tighten up in some way, that their thoughts become more spiky, more jagged, that often their breathing becomes shallower, or maybe even hold their breath completely. That's a very, the freeze response as animals, we're making ourselves imperceptible, so that's sort of freezing. You may notice that your vision becomes much more tunnel vision, and you've got less access to peripheral vision, which is a stress response, and you may feel less connected with the people around you. And then most people, when feeling that charge, we tend to tighten up, contract, and become separate from other people. Our thinking gets tighter. And also notice fundamentally, is your temptation to sort of go towards, to want to perhaps be aggressive, to attack, to come back at the thing that you're angry, to move into blame? Or do you tend to want to run away and escape? Do you tend to want to freeze, just hope that you're not going to be noticed? Or do you tend to want to fawn? And that's another of the stress responses, perhaps more of a placatory response to sort of make it okay with the other person. So notice all of those responses. And this is about really bringing to the foreground, how do I experience my anger? And this is something that often we don't bring conscious attention to bring conscious attention to it. And there's nothing right or wrong about these responses. These are deeply wired responses that we have as human beings. So, having registered all of that, let it all go. Let's come back to neutral. Now, once again, so what I want you to do now is feel your sitting bones on the chair, feel your feet on the floor, feel the connection with the ground beneath you, supporting you, there for you. And now bring your attention to your spine and take a breath in up your spine, breathing in, and then breathe out, nice long exhale, sighing the breath out down the front of your body. Once again, breathe in, up your spine, breathing in and exhale. And imagine the breath going down the front of your body. And think of someone that makes you smile, and allow a smile to come to your face. So smiling, connecting, bring out either a person or a place. And then stretch your arms, wiggle your fingers, stretch out, if you like, all around you. Extend out into the space around you. And imagine sending your energy out into the four corners of the room that you're in, filling the space. Let's come back to feeling your feet on the ground. And now I want you to once again call to mind that thing that triggers you. So bring it to mind. And let that feeling, let that charge come through your body. And just allow it to fill your body. And this time stay expanded. So rather than contracting, just allow it to really fill up your body. And notice the charge in your body. Bring your attention to your thoughts. Notice what your thoughts are like, the shape of your thoughts. Bring your attention down to your heart area. Really allow this charge to fill up your heart area. So rather than closing your heart down in the face of this anger, invite it to stay open. Let the charge fill your heart. And now bring this energy down into your pelvis. Feel the whole of your pelvic bowl. Bring it down. Let it fill your pelvis, and almost imagine that it's almost like hot volcanic energy. And you're filling up your pelvic bowl. And now send the energy down through your legs. Bring your breath down. Let yourself breathe really deeply. Take some really deep breaths. And let this charge flow through your body. It's energy, it's life force. Enjoy breathing into it. Now take a moment, ask yourself, from this place of fullness and energy coursing through me, let me tune in to my space of wisdom in my head. What guidance does my head have for how I might act in this situation? Just notice what comes to you. It doesn't need to make rational sense. Just see what guidance may come in terms of words, it may come in terms of an image, it may come in terms of a sensation. Notice what impressions you receive. Now bring your attention down into your heart area. As I say, allow it to be full, allow it to be open. Notice what feelings. I often notice that when I allow my heart to stay open, there's usually some grief or sadness there that I've been armoring against. For others, it may be different feelings. And sometimes simply just allowing myself to have those feelings is powerful in itself. So really rest into your heart. Notice what feelings are there, maybe what guidance. And then finally, bring the energy, bring your attention down into your pelvis area, your core. Again, this is the area that so often women are cut off from. It's a sense of power. And being able to root our energy, our charge, our force down into our core. Notice what does your core, your hara, have to say to you? What guidance? Notice what it feels like to really hold that charge. We're so used to moving away from it, making ourselves small, squeezing it out, pushing it away. Notice now what your breathing's like. Is it fuller? Is it deeper? Once again, feel your sitting bones on the floor.
And Liz, if it's okay, I'll read out a couple of, we've got some
Please
lovely
do.
comments in the chat. More relaxed and grounded, sense of power and possibility. And the idea of connection to the ground or to the floor is important. I had to lower my office chair. My feet feel tingly. Thank you, Anne. Very precise in a good way after the exercise. That sense of both grounding and uplift is extremely important. Sense of things feeling more relaxed, feeling more rooted, more clarity. And it's interesting to realize that, or to think about the pelvis as a location of power. It's incredibly important. And of course, it links to a whole raft of structural reasons why women have to feel angry. There's a recent report by the UK government about embedded misogyny in the NHS, how women's issues, anything to do with the pelvis basically, is minimised or ignored.
I think there's another quote that we wanted to share, probably many of you are familiar with, from Viktor Frankl. There is stimulus and there is response. And in the space between stimulus and response, that's where freedom and growth lies. And sometimes the most important thing is to sit with the stimulus, sit with the feelings, and not automatically go into action. Whilst we advocate right to action, sometimes what's important is to learn how to tolerate that charge and sit with it and wait for clarity about right action, rather than dissipating our energy with lots of small actions, or with just getting caught up in the outrage, which social media and the media wants to hook us into that outrage, but it isn't actually necessarily productive.
A really important point for everything that we do. we have a tendency, again, I was going to say, particularly as women, in my experience, and I've coached both men and women a lot over many, many decades, is we have a tendency to turn anything into a sort of stick to beat ourselves. I should be going to the gym more. I should be, oh, now I should really be able to connect with my anger. Let's not turn this into another must do, but ruminate, compost, weave. Just let's explore together. As Liz was saying, it's too tempting, particularly with emotional charge that is uncomfortable, difficult to hold, high charge of any kind, whether we designate it positive or negative. It's quite hard to hold any kind of emotional charge, and we want to discharge, whether that's evacuated and just put it on somebody else. Me angry? No, he's the one who's, or whether it's into action immediately. And I think what's critical, and I know Liz is now going to go on and explain, is how do we learn how to be with that charge so that we got that space to, and absolutely, there are days when the protectors, thank goodness for them. So
Yeah.
be well.
So I'm going to share some theory with you.
Hi, Lucy.
Yeah. So if we think about this in terms of something happens, something appears to come to us from the outside world that creates a response, creates that charge in our bodies. And for some of us, we'll be very comfortable with managing that, but for most of us, we won't, because we haven't really been taught how to do this. So sometimes it's simply really being willing to sit with that charge, welcome it in. There's that wonderful poem, welcome all these different emotions. You're in many rooms in my house. And often this is a room that we haven't spent much time in. So for many of us, just really sitting with it and getting curious about it and that physiological response and breathing into it and letting it just course through our body and seeing it as a source of energy will be the practice. For some of us, we're very quick to action. And so this just is very automatic. We'll quickly either want to discharge it, move away from it, express it towards someone else. We might be quite sort of explosive. So it may then be slowing down on the action part. And for some of us, we never get into action. We might just stay stewing in it. And I know I tend to be someone who sort of minimizes it, avoids it, spaces out into dissociation, overthinking, inner critic. That's my response to anger, rather than bring it into my body, letting myself feeling it, and then being fueled from that place. And usually, there's thinking about what do I want to do? And normally there's two parts to that. There might be, how do I regulate my system? So whether it's breath, exercise, writing, journaling, writing that angry letter that you don't send. How do I regulate myself? And then what's the action I choose to take in the world? So there's the external part as well. So I'm going to ask you to take a moment to jot down two things. What is one way that I can work with my felt sense of anger? What feels right for me? So is it breathing into it, sitting into it, maybe that practice of head, heart, and core? So write down one internal practice. So a way of getting to know better and welcome in your anger. And then one action that you want to take in the world, external behavior, around that particular topic you brought to mind. And maybe it's something that came from your head, your heart, or your core. And often a question I like to work with is, if I wasn't afraid how other people would react, what would I be saying or doing now? I unhook from my concerns about the opinions of others or approval. And take a moment to write that down, so that you've got two specific takeaways. And whilst you're doing that, Hetty's going to, for a few moments, talk about what we have coming up. Mm.
So part of our this is part of our series on power, and power is something that we explore. And so we'll look further at this at our Athena Leadership Intensive. We look at the conscious and unconscious influences. We major on this embodied presence idea because it all begins with the body. We look at purpose, having a deep dive, and embodied listening, and this whole movement of power from power over, from a dominator model that we're used to a collaborator partnership model. So we'll talk also about the drama triangle and yeah, ways that we can take small risks, if you like, to allow ourselves to experience ourselves as powerful in a way that feels right for us. So this is day 2, changing the rules of the game, is where we begin to take ownership, and we look at risks through stories, a little bit of teaching using I work a lot with Simon Weston, and this is his model of the 4 leadership discourses in the 21st century around controller, therapist, messiah, and where the eco leadership, this interconnectedness, this interdependence. And then you have an opportunity to actually stand up and feel your own power, embodied speaking. How do you express yourself with clarity, precision, and take a stand? So all of that in a action-packed and deeply reflective, charged 2 days. These groups are a wonderful way to really make a big shift in the way we are and act in the world. So if you are tempted, we'd love to have you. We have just a couple of places left on the April iteration. Just get in touch. There it is, 7th to the 8th of April. Our next free webinar will be about soft power, hard power. What's the difference? Do join us in that. And let's now hear a few words from you. We've got a small amount of time, but we'd love to hear from you. There's lots of great things in the chat, isn't there?
Yes, wonderful stuff. Loads of great ideas.
Harness the anger to strengthen, going into nature, breathing deeply.
Yes, listening, journaling, aligning heaven, human, and earth, head, heart, and core,
Very nice.
and
Very
speaking
nice.
from that place with feeling. Yeah.
Lovely to have you here, Vicky. Vicky works with the body in the most wonderful ways.
Yes.
So that's great. And I think that, other ways that we can channel anger, because I know I often express my anger through irritation or I become short-tempered. And of course, it's always our loved ones, our nearest and dearest who bear the brunt of it because it's probably the safest. We instinctively feel it's safer to be rude and horrible with those who love us and put up with us than in the workplace. But another way is to flip it absolutely on its head and say, what can I do to help someone? What can I do to make a contribution today? And it could be something really small. I know that a big change in my life, there was a period in my life when I worked at a local migrant centre. And instead of being furious and angry at the whole way that our governments treat refugees and those seeking sanctuary, I worked actively with them. And it was just, an afternoon a week in a period when I could do that. But it flipped things hugely for how I experienced my anger. So that's another one can add in there.
But another piece of useful information to think about is also how this relates to the seasons, going back to our work with the Celtic calendar. That the spring is the time of the energy rising, the sap coming up. And in the Chinese 5 elements system, it's the time of the liver and the gallbladder, which relates to anger and frustration. So this is the time when we feel these things most strongly as well. And I often find a sort of agitation in the spring. So it's perfectly normal to be feeling that. And also there's something about the seasons of our lives as well. And certainly post menopause, estrogen makes us nice, makes us tolerate small children and be patient with them and all of those things. And post menopause, all of that estrogen wanes and we're left with often a lot of anger. And I've spent the last few years waiting for it to dissipate. And I finally realized it's not going to go away. And I need to find a different way to work with it, that this sort of, yeah, to channel it. And I'm not going to go back to that sort of estrogen flooded person I was. So I think recognizing that, if you're feeling more, background level of anger and irritation at this phase of life, those of you who are in a similar phase of life, that is to be expected.
Right. On that note, we're going
Mhm.
to end, but let's end with a stretch so that we
Mhm.
leave you in an expanded place. If you put your hands together as if you want to pull them apart, right down to the webbing between your
Mhm.
fingers, if you can. I've got too many rings on today, but right down, and then turn your hand around and lift it up. This is a classic pose. I used to know what it's called, but it escapes me today. And take a deep breath in, turn to the right, and let the air out. Come back to the center. Take another deep breath in and turn to the left. Release. Let your come back to the center and let your arms in a lovely big stretch, filling as much tingling space as you possibly can. You should feel a lovely little bit of energy shoot down your arms. I wish you wonderful days, evenings, mornings, afternoons, wherever you're at in your circadian rhythm. And we will see you hopefully soon. Thank you for
Mhm.
joining us today. It's been very rich.
Thank
Thank you.
you.